We got 6 p.m. on Monday, February 6th, so I'll call to order this meeting of the Winooski Liquor Control Board. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilor Oakley.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That is awkward to do.
Yes.
I'm gonna make next time. Okay, thank you. So we just have the one regular item for discussion or approval of Bar Trading LLC's second-class license, tobacco license, substitute endorsement. Jenny,
Yes.
would you like to share?
Sure.
Introduce.
Sure. So I was hoping that Mr. Chair would be here, but what happened last year is the council approved this liquor license. We sent it on to the state, but the state was unable to gain the documentation that they need to issue a license. So it's technically a new license. It's 357 Main Street. It was Shiva Ram. And but the state sent everything back because they weren't able to approve the liquor license. But that liquor license was still in effect until this year. So this
I didn't quite
applicant,
follow.
so
They didn't have their documents last year, but now they do.
yes.
Okay. Any questions from council?
Are there any concerns from the fire department? Any?
No.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Any questions from members of the public? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve this second-class license, tobacco license, and substitute endorsement?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. That's the end of our liquor control meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
Motion by Aurora, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Time to go home.
That's not what it sounds like.
Jim, I'll give you a minute to settle.
Thank you.
We're just the liquor control board.
Got it.
Perfect timing.
You can start when you're ready, Mayor.
Okay. It is 6:03 on Monday, February 6th. I will call to order the Winooski City Council meeting now. We first had agenda review. Are there any concerns about the order of tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Next up is public comment. So this is space for members of the public to make comment about topics not on this evening's agenda. If you are here for an item on the agenda, please wait for us to get to that item. We will have time for public comment with each item. Is there anyone in the room wishing to make a public comment?
No.
Not at this
No.
time.
Anyone on Zoom? You can use chat or the raise hand feature. Okay. Seeing no comment, we'll move to our consent agenda. So we have corrected council minutes from January 3rd, our minutes from January 23rd, the public hearing minutes from January 26th, the accounts payable warrant from February 1st, and the payroll warrant for January 8th to 21. Are there any questions or comments about the any consent agenda items? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. This is really effective, having the Bryn first, Aurora, and then you jump in, so well done. I can hear everything. Okay, council reports. Bryn, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. I don't have any updates for the Infrastructure Commission since the last meeting. We did have the second hearing of just cause eviction, public hearing on Saturday. We had about 30 folks in attendance, which was really wonderful considering the weather conditions for the weekend. And there was, really great participation, so, from the community and, residents as well as some others that are interested that are outside of our, they're not residents of Winooski. So I think there'll be, potentially some updates to the fact sheet, but we anticipate seeing, having any more comments or thoughts come directly to city council or to city staff from this point, moving forward. So that's it.
Thank you for the recap. Jim?
Yes, I attended the Airport Commission meeting on last Wednesday, and the commission reviewed the audit, which showed the annual audit, which showed no material findings, the airport in good financial health with an upgraded financial status. So it's good for our regional international airport. They did report that the second phase of noise mitigation, home renovations for noise mitigation, the 54 homes design phase went to homeowners for their approval, and when that is received, it'll go back to the airport to apply for FAA funds for implementation. So that's I believe that's the second phase, and the third phase of application is coming up as well. And there's additional, so that's the next round of funding is being sought for design on that next round of houses based on the total noise impact. So good to see continuing progress on that effort at the airport. I was also fortunate to attend the Champlain Housing Trust's annual meeting a week ago Friday, and accept an award on behalf of the city presented by CHT for their community award for the work that's the city of Winooski has done on affordable housing and provision and community supports around that in the city. It was a great night, lots of residents as well as board members and community members there. Great to share in the kind of collective success of the Champlain Housing Trust and the work that they've done in Winooski and beyond. I really want to thank the board and Executive Director Michael Monti for the recognition and the invitation to speak, and also to fellow counselors, or former city managers, current residents who are also Winooski residents. It was great to have that group there and be able to accept on that behalf. We also had several housing commission members and people who've worked on equity work in the city in attendance. It was a good gathering. So just want to extend that appreciation back out and thank the counselors here and the community for the work done to support that as well. So those are my two reports.
Thank you. Thomas?
Nothing super important to report, really. Just I found it comical at our last downtown Winooski meeting. We were starting to talk about Winooski Wednesdays, even though it was freezing outside. But that group is just gearing up to start the planning process for all of our summer events. So you'll be seeing on their socials and their websites the annual call for volunteers and folks who want to be engaged on Winooski Wednesdays. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Aurora?
About a couple updates. The first I want to mention is the Inclusion and Belonging Commission meeting would normally be held this week on the 9th. Because it overlaps with the joint school board and city council dinner and budget presentation, we are just discussing postponing the meeting until the 23rd, so members who are interested, commission members and members of the community can attend the budget meeting, as that feels very important to make sure everyone's informed on that. We have our upcoming State Healthy Connected People Commission meeting on the 14th. That's at 6 p.m. It will be over Zoom. We have a couple things on there, including budget review, possibly from the chiefs, and checking in on a survey that's going to go out to kind of get a sense of need or long-term needs of community members in relation to events held by community service, events in clubs and stuff like that. And so update on had our second in-person ideal meeting, our fourth meeting overall, since we last met. And I think the thing that I want to bring attention to councilors and city staff and city residents is one of the things shared with us is the Office of Racial Equity completed a language access report. That's now available on our website, and they're going to create some shorter versions too that can, and some translated versions to be able to kind of spread that to a wider audience, the information found there. That is focused on the state level and state government, but there's a lot of information in there that can be useful and informational as we're thinking about how municipalities can help in this work meet both federal regulations as well as making sure residents are able to be engaged in municipal government. So those are my updates.
Great, thank you. Planning Commission is scheduled to meet Thursday, February 9th at 6:30 p.m. their regular meeting time. That is also in conflict with the community dinner and budget presentations. However, that commission is going to host their meeting as planned. Given they had to cancel their last one because it conflicted with the first public hearing, and they want to keep the work moving forward. That joint city school budget presentation with a free community meal supplied by the Partnership for Prevention. Food pickup starts at 5:30. Presentations start at 6 at the O'Brien Community Center. It's this Thursday. Then the other update is on Friday I was able to join the Senate Economic Development Committee, who is drafting a bill intended to address our housing crisis. That bill included quite a bit. A lot of suggestions to streamline or update regulations, funding to help municipalities update their regulations. The primary focus of the testimony I provided was to urge them to include incentives for 3-bedroom or larger housing, as we've seen that priority here. And our zoning administrator is graciously helping put together some information for them to better understand where there's duplicative permitting process at the state level that we're already doing locally to try to be strategic about what streamlining is proposed. Should I see updates on that moving forward from our Senate representation? I'll try to help push those out as well, as I see them doing them too on local channels. That's it for my council report. So, Elaine, city updates.
Yes, so town meeting day is coming up. As a reminder, the election is on Tuesday, March 7th. Voting takes place at the Winooski Senior Center from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Early voting and absentee ballots will be available after February 17th at the city clerk's office at 27 West Allen Street. For all ballot and budget details, you may visit winooskivt.gov/townmeeting. As a reminder, all legal residents, regardless of your U.S. citizenship status, can vote on town meeting day. Translated do we know what's happening?
It's not me.
Looks like you're unmuted.
Is it me?
I think someone just muted Bren.
Am I still echoing? No. Okay.
No.
Christine, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you're good now.
All right, thanks. So, translated ballots will be available in 11 languages. If you still need to register to vote, please visit winooskivt.gov/vote for details or stop by the city clerk's office for information. If you have questions, call or email 802-655-6410 or clerk@winooskivt.gov. And be sure to join us for the upcoming upcoming budget presentations. The city and school budget community dinner, as the mayor just referred to, is Thursday, February 9th, 5:30 p.m. at the O'Brien Community Center. Town meeting TV budget presentation is Friday, February 10th at 5:25 p.m. You can watch the live stream on youtube.com/townmeetingtv or on Comcast channel 1087. You can call in with your questions about the budget to 802-862-3966. That's live questions during the budget presentation live on Town Meeting TV. There's also a city and school virtual budget presentation on Wednesday, February 22nd at 6 p.m. via Zoom. And the annual town meeting day budget presentation is on Monday, March 6th, 6 p.m. at the Winooski School District Performing Arts Center. Again, visit winooskivt.gov/townmeeting for all ballot, budget, and meeting information. Speaking of the ballot, if you missed the January 26th or February 4th public hearings on just cause eviction, that is going to be on the ballot as proposed by voters. You can visit winooskivt.gov/justcause for information sheets in various languages, a recording of the meeting from the 26th hearing, and minutes for both that hearing and the February 4th hearing. I would like to take a moment and thank the Winooski Fire Department and many neighboring agencies for their efforts during the significant fire on Main Street last week and the many calls that they responded to this weekend. Related to that, I also want to thank everyone in the community who helped share all of the important information from our state and regional partners regarding extreme winter weather event that happened on Saturday. Emergency preparedness is always important, and having that plan is important too. And lastly, if you've just about had it with winter weather, season passes for adults, families, youth, and seniors officially went on sale for the 2023 Myers Memorial Pool season. Visit winooskivt.gov/pool to get yours today and check back for the full schedule of recreation programs.
Thank you. We'll move into our regular items now. First up, item A on for discussion approval is a Finance Commission appointment.
All right, so the mayor, the Finance Commission chair, and our Inclusion and Belonging liaison to the Finance Commission interviewed James Messender for the Finance Commission last month. He seems to be a great candidate and brings a lot of strategic and long-term planning to the role. We are recommending his appointment for the unexpired full seat that was previously held by Sheldon Goodwin, who resigned when she left the city.
Thanks, Angela. Is James in City Hall per chance?
I do not believe so.
Okay. All right. You have his information in the packet. He was probably the best study. I've seen him come to a commission interview before. Like, he really did his homework and really is interested in this role. Is all that I would add there. Are there any questions, concerns? Would someone like to make a motion to approve the appointment of James Messender to the Finance Commission?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Item B for discussion approval. We have two Safe, Healthy, Connected People Commission appointments.
Hey, yes, and one of our appointees is here with us, Hannah Krafix. I think Paul's going to bring it over. But similar to Angela's update, Aurora, Mary Hessman, our chair, and John Adi and I interviewed two candidates, Amanda Goldstein and Hannah Krafix, and are recommending both of them for full positions. Meredith Bushy, who had been in a full position, is on maternity right now, so we are recommending to move her for the remainder of this year to an alternate position. And like I said, Hannah is here on Zoom, and Amanda sends her regrets. She had another commitment tonight that she could not change, but is very excited to join us. As are we excited to have her. So, yeah, I don't know if you have questions for Hannah or let you have at it.
Yeah, would you like to just do a quick introduction?
Sure, can you all hear me?
Yeah, welcome.
Great, hi. Yeah, so I did my interview with some of the commission members and also the fire chief, John, I believe his name is, last week. And I became interested in this commission because of both my work as a social worker and just my time spent here in the community in Winooski, so excited to be a part.
Well, thank you for your interest. I read your application. You look very well suited. Maria Aurora said it Amanda as well. Any questions from council? Would someone like to make a motion to approve these appointments?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are on to item C. This is on for discussion, Green Mountain Transit. We have the new general manager with us.
We do.
Good evening, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, great. So my name is Clayton Clark, and tomorrow will be my fourth week anniversary in the new role at GMT. I'm excited that as a former Winooski resident, that Winooski is the first municipality that I'm here talking to, so glad to be here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our fiscal year 24 budget, and I'm happy to report that for Winooski, the assessment was a decrease of 3.8% from last year. I understand that last year there was a bump up because of higher than anticipated paratransit costs, and that with that going down some, that even though there was a slight increase in fixed rate or fixed route routes, that your overall assessment went down a little bit. The things that I want to bring up about the budget is that there's two items that got a lot of interest from the public. One was making permanent some service reductions that have been in place for almost 3 years. And so in March and April of 2020, when the pandemic started, there were 2 routes that went through Winooski that ended up having fewer routes or fewer visits during the day. That those were cut for our pandemic operations, and the budget made them permanent. And so there's not, the budget didn't make a reduction in current service, but a reduction, or made permanent the reduction from essentially 3 years ago. So that's one item I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware of and that we received comment on. The other item was the potential that we would be returning back to offering fares. And so people may recall that again, at about the time that we made the service reductions, we also stopped collecting fares as an infection control method, so that we would have riders entering through the back of the bus, the doors that are on the back of the bus, so that they would have limited contact with drivers. And so that was a major sort of philosophical change about how public transit should be funded, that was made very quickly for infection control procedures. And now we're in a situation where we need to figure out whether that should be permanent. In order for that to be permanent, there would need to be a sort of change in philosophy with the state of Vermont, and a real look at how we're funded, how the municipalities fund things, because we cannot, we would have to identify fare replacement. We've been able to be fare free because of the COVID relief funds, and so just like everybody in lots of local and state governments, GMT has received significant COVID relief funds. Those are coming to an end, hence our need to recontemplate fares. I can tell you that although our budget considers restarting fares on July 1st, that there is that there's a debate at the State House of whether they should provide additional support for us so that they could continue. So that we can continue to operate fare-free. And I also know that since getting some of our fare boxes out of the mothballs, or out of the mothball storage, that we've discovered that some of them are no longer supported by the manufacturer, and we are probably going to have a hard time collecting fares on July 1st. So I think that there's still a lot up in the air about whether we will restart, but I suspect that will be pushed back, and so it's a very fluid situation at the moment. I wanted to, as best I can, considering that I've been here for 4 weeks, give you all the opportunity to ask questions about GMT. I definitely want to thank Elaine for making the arrangements here, but also in your packets providing a really great sort of summary of how our municipalities work with GMT and that you all have representation on our board. And in fact, behind me is my boss, Austin Davis, who is Winooski's commissioner and is the president of our board of commissioners. And so with that, is there anything that I can do to help you understand our operations?
Well, thanks for coming in, Clayton,
Yeah.
to introduce yourself. It was great to meet you in this new role.
Thank you.
I do want to recognize that you are new and still in a learning mode and have not come to us today with a bunch of solutions or changes.
Yes.
And also thank Austin. I think he's been doing a good job keeping on top of things, and I'm certain that he'll keep us in the loop of how things progress at the State House with funding. We've been engaged in those discussions too.
Excellent.
The one thing that I would want to share is just that there is strong interest in our community of expanded, more frequent service.
Yes.
I know you're not at a point to, get into the weeds on that, but I just want to make that known that when we think about alternative funding structures, working with the state on that, like to the extent we can increase service would be very helpful to residents.
Absolutely. I can tell you that one of the things that probably worries me a little bit more than money is staffing. And that I can tell you that even if there's been a lot of talk of $1 trillion coin being printed or made to solve our, budgetary problems. And so if GMT got a hold of one of those, we still would have a problem with increasing service simply because of our inability to attract CDL drivers. And so one of the things that when you see one of our blue buses going around town, there's about a 1 in 3 chance that the driver of that bus is on overtime. And frequently that overtime is forced overtime. And so it's not really sustainable, in my view, long-term to continue operating that way. And so to me, the biggest barrier for increasing service is probably going to be staffing that.
That's really helpful. Thank you for telling us about that.
Thank you.
Open it up to council for additional questions. I can't see you right now, so let's just speak up too.
I'll start. So considering that challenge, is there a plan of action or any strategy for how to address the workforce challenges?
So I can tell you that the CDL shortage is across Vermont and across the country. We even will train somebody who, so any council member that would like to become a bus driver, we will train you to get your CDL. And we'll pay for all of that. We'll actually pay you while you're training. So we are doing things that we haven't done in the past to attract talent. And I can tell you my previous job was in healthcare, and I've been surprised at the similarities between trying to fill nursing positions and driver positions. Is it really is that there's just not enough people in the state that have that specific licensure to go around. So Bren, that's an answer that no, I don't have anything very, there's no magic bullet, but we're thinking about it a lot.
Good. Yeah, that is surprising to me because I've seen your compensation packages and they're quite good. So I assumed you would not have problems finding people to work. So
The benefits that we offer are outstanding. And so definitely when you consider that our union drivers pay nothing for their health insurance for them and their families, that is a benefit itself that's worth quite a bit.
You mentioned the legislature is possibly considering helping your current fee model. Mm-hmm. Is that, how far along in their kind of process is that? Is it in committee or is it just talks?
Sure. So there was a bill that was introduced, H101, and that bill provided some very broad changes to how Vermont does transportation. But when it came to public transit, or in GMT specifically, What it contemplated was a $1.2 million appropriation to help continue zero fare. Unfortunately, to do zero fare through the entire fiscal year 24 would take about $2 million, so it doesn't fit the full amount. We were in a similar situation last year where the state provided some additional funds for zero fare, and then we used COVID relief funds to make the difference. But we just aren't in a position now where we can use relief funds again to carry us through another year.
Those are all my questions.
Okay.
Are there any more questions from council?
We got one more.
I have another question.
Mhm.
So I think I learned recently that GMT's expanded their service area to other counties.
So that happened about a decade ago, and but it's still, in government terms, very new.
Right. Good to capture that.
Yeah.
So do those other service areas outside of Chittenden County have representation on the board?
So they do not have representation on the board, and frankly, that's something that I don't quite understand yet as far as how that will work. I know that the statute was amended to allow them representation, and so but I'm not aware of any choosing to do so. I can tell you that it's a very different. The way we receive funding from them is different than the way we receive funding from you in our urban areas. And one of the things that may be confusing, it certainly is confusing me, is that there's a very separate distinction in the federal government between urban operations and rural operations. And so that's why you're going to see that some of the opportunities that rural areas have and urban areas have, and vice versa, aren't necessarily going to be applying in both locations. And what you're finding also in the rural areas is a real emphasis on looking at on-demand transportation, because with the lower population density, having fixed route just is not a good, model for getting people to different places, and so you see more on-demand transport in those locations.
Recently, I was talking with some residents about service within Winooski, within and around Winooski, and what would be feasible, and what would the cost even be to have a shuttle within the city?
That I really don't know yet. I can tell you that we have approached the operations within Winooski, Burlington, Essex, Williston area with a fixed route model that's based on 40-foot buses. And perhaps our labor scarcity at CDL is going to force us to have to change that at some point in time, in which case I think that you may see a very different model. But at this point, I really can't speculate.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Aurora?
Yeah, this probably isn't so much a question, but I think something my fellow councilors I hope will keep in mind as we talk or advocate with our counterparts in the state. Is I believe the Winooski school has never been able to kind of buy in to have free fare for students. Similarly, CCD hasn't done that. So offering that free fare is, I think, if we're able to continue that, is really important and really benefits our residents, particularly students that live in the city, especially thinking about like after-school games and stuff like that for that safe transit. So I want to note that as well.
And I can tell you that in our past practice is to provide discounted fares for folks based on age, but of course a discounted fare is not fare free.
Is there any public comment in the room?
No.
Okay, yeah, we do have a number of public members in Zoom.
council today. I have a question about the procedure for municipalities to request both cost estimates and increases in service. It seems like GMT doesn't really have enough planning staff to accommodate these kinds of requests. Just moving forward, would it be helpful to work with the Regional Planning Commission to get some of these sort of cost estimates of increased service moving forward? Because it just doesn't seem like we've been able to get responses from GMT.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that there's been difficulty in getting responses as your experience. I do know that we are very much working with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and that we'll be having some additional planning work done with them through their processes this year. And when you look at our membership of our Board of Commissioners, most of the folks that are on the commission are actually part of their regional planning commission, and so they're very much is their participation in what we do. I can tell you, Michael, one of the things that I've, just observed is that, GMT is extremely lean. When it comes to administrative staff, we've always placed a prioritization, I think, on our driving capacity and our mechanic capacity, which, I think totally makes sense, because that's where literally the rubber meets the road. But I think that it does mean that we have had challenges with capacity at planning, and so I'm sorry that that's what you've experienced, but it's certainly something that I'll be looking at, is to figure out how we can leverage what we have for expanded planning options.
Thanks for that, and I didn't mean it in an accusatory way. I hope
and Michael, do you have my contact information? Because it's I would love to talk with you. It sounds like you are familiar with working with us, and so I'm at Clark, CCLARK @ridegmt.com.
Okay, thanks for that. And I do want to highlight, I just want to give our counselors also
okay.
Sorry?
I see the yellow around your box, Michael, but we didn't hear you.
I can try again. Can you hear me now?
Christine, could you speak to see if
can you guys not hear
there's
us?
something wrong with the speakers? I'm not sure what it is.
I'm just gonna sort of talk. Let me know if it.
Well, Michael, do you want to wait a minute? I don't think the folks in the room can hear those of us on Zoom yet.
Yeah, I think it's chambers only, because I can hear both of you just fine.
Yeah, we're just gonna keep making noise so that they can.
Hear you now.
Right.
If it comes back on.
We can hear you now.
Yep. So sorry we missed what you said before, Michael.
I didn't mean to be right. I just wanted to, hopefully give staff and counselors, next steps if they're interested in expanding service. Maybe GMT isn't the right avenue to, go. Maybe we need to be adding things to the CCRPC work plan to get these routes studied for cost estimates and whatnot.
Thanks for that, Michael.
And Mayor Lott, thank you for sending my email address in the chat.
Sure. Elaine?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. So I think it might have been Austin who told me once upon a time that you have a pretty decent informal process for onboarding new Americans. And given our population is so, significantly new American compared to other Vermont communities, and if you're looking for drivers, thinking about whether there's an opportunity to be more deliberate about recruiting from those communities and what that might look like.
Well, I can tell you that part of the diversity that is GMT is that a significant portion of our drivers are new Americans. And at this point, I don't actually know what we've done to recruit into that population, and I don't know if Austin wants to try to weigh in. But I'm happy to get back to you all so that we can distribute it to the council, what those are. But I just, that hasn't been actively on fire this past 4 weeks, and so I haven't learned about it yet.
Yes, understand that. Well, yeah, we'd be happy to push out that, recruitment information if it's available.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think, one of the things that excites me about the new role is that the person who had been the general manager for 3 years, as interim general manager, is John Moore, and he is staying, and he is essentially going to be continuing his role of making sure that the internal GMT operations are working well. And I'm going to be able to be much more externally focused than he has been able to be, and certainly making partnerships with all of the communities in our area, including New Americans, is something that's going to be high on my list. Because first off, these are communities that we want to serve for our services, and also communities that can support us with coming to work for us.
Are there any more questions or comments? Okay.
Thank you so much, and I will go.
Thank you so much.
I'll go get my critique from Austin now, and you all have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you for
That
coming.
sounds perfect. Okay, we're going to move on to item D. This is on for discussion and approval. The Vermont Economic Progress Council Tax and Financial District Annual Report. Angela.
So those of you on council from prior years know that this is a routine item, comes every year. So part of the TIF legislation requires that we bring before you our report to the Vermont Economic Progress Council of the previous year's performance. So all of the information contained in this report is primarily for fiscal year 2022, which has been audited. We have received our agreed upon procedures audit from RHR Smith. It's pretty straightforward. We also outline our goals and how we've achieved those, which for the most part are affordable housing and commercial growth within the district. The assessor, Ted Nelson, has signed off on the valuation of the TIF district with my counter signature. And this would just be requesting authorization for Elaine to sign on behalf of the council.
Thank you, Angela. Are there any questions from council? Any questions from members of the public? Okay.
I just want to, on the final document, I think in the series that was there, on page 8. So just kind of wanted to emphasize the last two sentences, basically say, during the fiscal year 2024 budget process, the council has opted to bridge to the expiration of the TIF using ARPA dollars and integrate it into the operating budget, the community services grant funded position, other than the circulation assistant and the records clerk support regional dispatch. And it ends with, in all likelihood, this will use the remaining portions of future TIF funds as currently predicted. So just kind of wanted to draw attention to that again, since it might get lost in the context of all of the content that was provided.
That's great. We'll be highlighting that in the budget presentation as well for the public. So hearing no concerns, would someone like to make a motion to approve this item authorizing the city manager to sign off on this report?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to item E, on for discussion approval, Main Street Revitalization, USDA, and Vermont Bond Bank bond resolutions.
Great, thank you. So, pretty exciting news. We're getting very close to getting the Main Street project out to bid. I was hoping to say we had all right away easements in enough that we have to start buttoning up some of these items for finance folks before we can get out to bid and get a notice to proceed from those agencies. So in your packet, there are a bundle of 4 bond resolutions. So 3 of them are USDA. So USDA is our primary lender on this project. Before we can get the project out to bid, this is one of the 9 items that they require before they can sign off. So we're not asking you to spend any money tonight, but this is one of the checklist items that they require. So the 3 bonds are for the different categories of funding work. So it's the water work, the sewer work, and the general fund scope of work, which is under their community facilities program. So the one really great news with the USDA funding is we locked in the interest rate back in 2018, I think it was. So we locked in a 3.125 interest rate. The terms are a little bit different for the water sewer fund. Water fund is 40-year bond, and the sewer fund is a 30-year bond. Same for the general fund. So we have a really good interest rate on these loans. And yeah, hopefully we expect to have the easement, like I said, this week, and then we've got some work to do with our legal folks to get all the paperwork executed and title certificates, but we want to be out to bid by next month and see what we get for a price on this project. So the other bond resolution that we lumped into this packet is for the bond bank. So this one will be for actually a proposal that you'll see next meeting. We just want to have the financing set up before we bring the proposal to you all. So this will be for the remaining professional consultant work. So this will be all the scope that they do during construction, helping prepare some of the bid documents, reviewing any contract issues, and a lot of it is for the construction and inspection work over the expected 3-year cycle of the project. So this bond, our bond counsel wrote this at Paul Frank Collins. This is for the general fund scope of that proposal that you'll see at the next meeting. And then we're working with our other financial partners, whether it be USDA or state revolving loan funds, to cover the water resources piece of that proposal. So a lot of agencies we're working with to kind of make this financing all work, all come together for the project. So I'll leave it at that if you have any questions on these items.
Lee?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to comment and acknowledge the team's effort, especially John and the city engineer, Ryan Lambert, for all of their efforts to get us to this point. It's been you can tell from the brief memo that there's a lot of work behind this project in terms of coordination of funding sources and just, of course, on the construction and design pieces too. And just as a reminder, John was an acting city manager throughout some of this, so Ryan was really carrying the water for some time, and John's finally been able to jump back in with me being here. So just want to take an opportunity to thank the staff for keeping this going.
Thanks, Elaine. I think the complexity just of what John was sharing around these documents in these different funding agencies is but a sliver of how big the scope of work is to do this Main Street project. Questions from council? Public comments?
Mayor Bryn had it.
I was trying to not be the first one to ask questions, but it just kind of ends up that way. So obviously we saw quite a few headlines recently where the state auditor reviewed project documents for the city of Burlington and some of the missed opportunities they had there, and just looking for assurances that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's, so we don't here find ourselves in a similar situation.
So I believe you're referring to the TIF findings, the TIF audit that was recently in the papers. I will say, so with this the VTrans grant folks. So that is actually some of the reason why this project has taken so long, is that we have to get sign off sort of on each and every step. And it's gotten to the point too where we've had to have calls and meetings with USDA folks and VTrans folks on the same call to make sure that contracts are being separated correctly, documents are being bid out correctly. So that is one of the major sort of behind the scene tasks, is making sure that when we get the project, we have our contracts set up right, so we're not missing any sort of grant reimbursements. So that is something that is probably taking the most time. But I've said this to Elaine and other folks, the design part's really easy. It's like all this other financial contract work to make sure that there's no risk when we're trying to get reimbursements, because it is such a costly project. We want to make sure that we're not going to leave anything on the table because we didn't put some clause in the contract or something.
It's really, I mean, that's really wonderful to hear that the agencies are willing to collaborate. The different levels of government are really very, I mean, a longer process, yes, but just ensuring that that we're able to ensure that the payments are more likely going to move through smoothly. So that's reassuring to hear. And then as a follow-up question, I think I saw a note in the list of documents here that there's some additional delay with reviewing, with getting EPA approval. I'm just was looking for a little bit more depth to what that was related to.
Sure. Yep. So, as we, the good thing with grants is, we do receive more money to help from the project, but sometimes it does impact on the administrative side. So, for that issue, we have to go through this environmental process called the NEPA process to make sure that the project isn't negatively impacting any sort of environmental components of the project, be it historic preservation or water resources, things like that. So in this particular case, we had to go through a pretty extensive NEPA process for the USDA funding. And then as we received some of the VTrans grants, we used the EPA's guidelines for that NEPA process through USDA. VTrans required us to go through Federal Highways NEPA process, which tacked on some additional schedule time. So we have brought that up to sort of some higher ups in both agencies to work on that, because a lot of it was pretty redundant. So we just want to make sure as other projects see like multiple funding facets that it should be streamlined. It's sort of checking the same environmental boxes. So yeah, that was the issue on that particular NEPA process.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate to hear. I do think it is worth noting the redundancy there for feedback for their own improvements on these large products, and just how significant that impacts a small city like ours. Thank you.
Any questions for members of the public? Hearing no concerns, I would entertain a motion to approve these 4 bond resolutions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thanks, John. On to item F for discussion approval, a resolution for the FY24 water rate. Wastewater is next, all tied into the budget we already approved. Is there anything you care to add?
Yeah, I can cover that. I can give the overview quick. So it is for the water rates, it's the same water rate we presented back in January when we did our budget. So it's $52.02 per 1,000 cubic foot. As mentioned, that is an increase over last year by about additional increased costs, specifically the increase we're seeing from Champlain Water District for buying bulk water, which that's about 52% of our overall water fund budget. So that comes in at like $570K. So that's primarily where that increase is.
And if we didn't approve these rates, we would essentially be asking to revisit the budget that was already done for these funds.
Yeah, this is for a balanced budget. So our water budget's around here 1.1 million for FY23, and that pays for existing capital costs that we already have. So there's no new capital for FY24 proposed.
Any questions from council?
Less a question. I just want to highlight something that we talked about when we were maybe the last budget day or the one before that. But just to confirm, these rates, although increased, they're not going to give you the money that we had talked about in a stretch budget for all of the water projects that you see that the city's going to need in the upcoming years.
Yeah, correct. That we'll have to figure out. We'll be reviewing potential grants and trying to find some support those ways. Although Main Street will be a significant water project as well, so that'll take a chunk out of the water main replacement work. But correct, that's not part of the stretch budget.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Any questions for members of the public?
Yeah, we have one. You come up here to the front and you can state your name and where you live.
Hi, James Messer. I'm from Winooski, live in West Center Street. I'm just curious, what is the rolling 5-year average of the most recent increases so far? And is it expected to be continuous on the current rate or slower in terms of increases in the next 5 years, 3 years?
We don't have that, right?
Yeah, I don't have it offhand. Our intent is to try to keep it at, a 2 or 3%. Once we get to a sustainable budget. So one of the issues why we've had to increase the budget, the water fund budget and sewer fund budget, is we were sort of subsidizing that budget with our fund balance. So that is obviously not sustainable. So we're luckily in a place now where we're a balanced budget. We're paying for our capital needs. We're paying for our operational costs. We will need to increase to start saving for some of the larger water main replacements, but we don't have, the intent there will be to do, high increases like this year. And hopefully we won't see the inflation like we see this year. That's one of the big issues too that we're seeing on the operations side.
Gotcha. Do you have any idea?
I have
Sorry.
the historical context. So, for prior fiscal years, the average increase was about 3.3%. If you include 5-year average with this 18.6% increase, it's 6.3% per year.
Understood. Any idea what the portion is attributed to inflation versus just nominal increase in operating expenses?
Offhand, I won't be able to do the math, but I can send that to you.
Just curious.
Yeah, it's, like I said, a lot of it for this year would be the CWD increase, which, is actually probably mostly inflation too. So,
right.
I suspect you can almost chalk up most all of this budget increase to inflation this year. Because last year, I believe it was the first year we actually caught up with having not to pay. We weren't subsidizing from our reserve fund last year. So the majority this year would be CWD, which is likely also inflation on their end.
Yeah, the increase from year over year is about 116,000, of which 85.9 is from the CWD rate. So almost 75% of our increase is due to the increased water costs that we have on our shoulders to pay out for every gallon of water people use in town.
Gotcha. Understood. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, James.
Hey, you're welcome. And FYI, the council approved your appointment to the the finance commission.
I heard, sorry, I was a little bit late today. I had a meeting that ran over, but thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
No worries, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for the questions. Are there any other public comment?
No.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution for the FY24 water rates?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. John, you want to do the quick wastewater cover, and then we'll move on that too?
Sure. So this is the same rate that you all saw back in the January meeting, $63.46 per 1,000 cubic feet. So this is also an increase from FY23, $6.11. This will cover the sewer fund budget, which is $1.37 million this year. One of the increases that we're seeing in the FY24 budget for this year is we actually have some proposed capital for FY24. So we've been holding back some of those capital costs to try to, again, catch up with this budget as well. So we have 3 capital projects, a small pickup truck replacement, and then 2 projects at our wastewater treatment plant that were recently identified as priority in our recent DEC third-year evaluation. So that is a new roof for our admin building that houses all our controls for the wastewater treatment plant, so that's not ideal. We want to have a good roof there, and one of the controls panels for our chlorine contact tank. So both are much needed projects.
Thanks, John. Any questions? Any public questions?
Nope.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the FY24 wastewater rate resolution?
So moved.
Motion by Jim, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. All right, thank you. Item H for discussion approval of the memorandum of understanding between the City of Winooski and the Winooski Incorporated School District for FY23 to 24.
Yeah, so reading from my cover sheet here, the Winooski City and School District have had an agreement as documented in a memorandum of understanding since at least FY 2009 to 10 to share resources where it makes sense. The goal of the MOU is to provide the community with the highest level of service in the most economical manner. The big change this year is the city no longer commits to providing snow plowing and salting services to the school. In recent years, city staffing has been insufficient to provide the timely services needed by both the school and the general traveling public, which is on city roads and sidewalks. And the city has had to contract out snow plowing of roads in order to meet its commitment to the school, so not necessarily economical. Even this year, with our road and sidewalk plows staffed fully, the city is staffed enough to plow city roads and sidewalks timely, not also the school. The school district was notified of this proposed change in November per agreement and has agreed to it. The new paragraph 7 helps formalize the arrangement regarding city use of Winooski School District multilingual liaisons. And going forward, given that the content of the MOU is largely operational, I'm recommending that council delegate execution of it to the city manager in the future, unless, of course, there are significant changes proposed by the city manager or WSD that would affect budgets.
Thanks, Elaine. On the snow plowing item, can we pass along the contract information that we've used to help them secure?
Yeah, I believe we've done so, actually.
Great.
Yeah.
Questions from council?
I guess the
Any
one.
public?
Oh,
Go ahead.
the
Sorry.
one. No, I didn't raise my hand. Sorry. The one piece I do see the benefit of treating this as an operational document. I think this is the one time that one of 2 times that we as a council interact with the school district in a way. So I guess one question, I don't know the answer necessarily, but I'm just curious what other people's thoughts are for like the benefit of reviewing this on an annual basis, is kind of refreshing our commitment and our understanding of what our current modes of interaction are with the school. Granted, this is not all of them. We do a lot of other things with the school, but this is this is really our only formalized arrangement with them. So I guess I wanted to put that question to the council and have us think about that before we just treat this as an operational document going forward.
There could certainly be other types of touch points.
Yeah, I think this document, okay, it has been the impetus to have a joint meeting, but the content of it is not very informative to how our political bodies should interact. So I've talked to the current school board president about, first of all, we're absolutely going to continue to have an annual meeting and keep that tradition going. But a great suggestion, I had asked about doing a biannual, increasing it to twice. I think there's appetite for that once they get settled with their new get the superintendent search in place. And it's something I can add to, maybe it's something we add to the council orientation, just to like set that understanding that like we will be engaging with this group annually, and then, you know, we can update it to biannually once we get to that point.
Go ahead, Aurora.
I'm just gonna go off what Jim said. I do kind of think I guess one item that I feel, I'd like to know if we touch, I think we do touch on other ways, but I'd like to confirm, because I think it is going to be discussion, not this fiscal year, but probably in the coming fiscal year, specifically around the SRO. So that would be the one thing in here that I do definitely think that should go, or council should have some say in that. And my assumption is we'll get that through the budget process, but I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, next year, that has been proposed, as you know, by the superintendent. And so that would be a significant change that you would then see the whole thing, because that would be triggering a significant budget change.
Yeah, I as well would assume that that would be a change significant enough to raise this up to council.
Perfect, thank you.
Bryn?
I agree with Councilor Duncan. I do personally see value in at least, even if it's an already confirmed document where, you know, the city manager has moved forward with it. It's just a nice reminder of the structure and agreement that's in place. So I'm fine if it's not for discussion approval for council, but I think it is beneficial to bring it back to council, especially anticipating new councilors and, you know, turnover that happens, to just share this not just at orientation, but on at least an annual basis.
Would it make sense to have it in plan for it to be in consent agenda?
A consent agenda?
On an annual basis?
I think that's fine.
The only other way I could imagine kind of integrating this relationship in is adding it to our schedule. We have one as like another meeting as our prioritization meeting, and maybe we tag a joint school board city council meeting as one of those other meetings that we hold, or kind of a co-located meeting. But
yeah, so we put the strategic prioritization like TBD,
yeah,
to council schedule. We could put this there too, TBD, or the joint meeting. Yeah. Since we need some time to work out what the date would be, but yeah, I agree.
I think that set of changes would make sense to me.
Cool. Other thoughts? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the MOU between the school and city for FY 23-24, as well as delegate future approval to the city manager for renewals that don't contain significant changes, while including the approved item in a consent agenda for council?
So moved. Never mind.
Could I just make a friendly addendum
Yes.
to make it, the significant is around budget specifically, just so that if there isn't a budget impact, you wouldn't necessarily expect to see it, if that's your understanding or what you would like to do.
Okay, let me rephrase it. And delegate future approval to the city manager for renewals that don't contain budgetarily significant changes. Moving this item to consent agenda.
I guess I would just say if there is a big change, even if it's not budgetary, would you just let us know?
Yes, I mean, you would see it in the consent agenda, if that's.
Sure, yeah. That's probably fine.
And since I changed the language, can someone make the?
Well, I guess I'm just sorry. I'm going back to before we go to the motion. So if the MOU changes to the school, the city won't request multilingual liaison services from the school. That won't have a budget impact, right?
I think it would, because we pay for those services.
Well, we have a line for interpretation, but we don't necessarily commit that to the multilingual language program at the school district. And if the school were to say you're not allowed to request that, we put in the MOU, that wouldn't get reviewed by council because it wouldn't have a budget impact. I would fully expect you to say, look, they took this out. It's not a budgetary impact, but it's a regular item in the agenda because it's a significant change in and of itself. To me, that would be a significant change. So I guess I don't know if we need to formalize that or if we want to just have that be an understanding that that'll get pulled out. And just worry within a consent agenda without a cover sheet to explain what changed and the potential significance of that change, that some of those some of that history could get lost if it's just a consent item that doesn't get the same level of review.
Well, yeah, I would actually include a cover sheet for to show any changes for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even to say that there weren't any significant changes.
All right, so I'll make the motion that you worded, Mayor Lott.
I'll second it.
Motion by Jim, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion carries, and Elaine, Angel, Jenny, whoever's doing this, pasted in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item I for discussion approval, the FY24 fund budgets and capital plans.
So yes, all Winooski voters approved the general fund budget, which you approved a couple weeks ago. Council alone, though, approves all the other fund budgets. We're going to come back to you next time for the community development fund, just because it's a little administratively complicated. So tonight, we're asking you to approve the budgets for the fiscal year 2023-2024 funds for water, wastewater, parking, community services programs, the tax increment finance district, and the rental registry as presented.
Thanks, Elaine. Aurora and Thomas, for your first time around. I don't know why we do it this way, but essentially we already did all the work of deciding what the budget is. We dig into the general fund, and then we always follow up with, we approve those rates that support the budget we already said we approved, and then we approve these separate funds. Angela, did you want to add some context?
So what you voted on last time was specifically just the amount to be raised by the general fund. When Jesse Baker started as city manager, we actually changed our budget process to present you all of the budgets at the same time. Historically, all of these other funds had previously been presented in the spring, around the April-May timeframe. So these do need to be approved separately, but they do not need to be approved by voters. And we just have the added extra step because at your next meeting, you will be meeting as the Board of Trustees for the Winooski Community Development Corporation to accept funds from the TIF district, donate it back to the city for community development, and then you can approve the community development budget.
So other than that, well, actually, this is true for all the other funds. So all the other funds technically have their own budget. That's why it's approved separately, but most of them are user fee supported. So I don't know that in statute it actually specifies that that's why the boards for water, wastewater, et cetera, are the ones approving everything and not the voters, but that's the distinction of why they're handled separately.
But it makes sense to me that we look at it all together and see a big picture before we vote on what we put to voters.
Right.
Are there any questions? Bryn?
I guess just revisiting some of the previous conversations we had around the rental registry and that as part of the fee ordinance review that might be coming up later this spring.
Right, so, because you wouldn't, it's ill-advised to adopt a budget before you've changed the fees officially, because who knows technically what might happen through that process. That would be the chance to revisit that. And just a reminder to anyone else, there was Bryn had brought up that we might be able to increase that and close the gap on the rental registry. So, but again, we didn't budget that way because it hasn't been approved by council.
Right.
Any other questions? All right, hearing no concern, do I have a motion to approve the FY24 fund budgets and capital plans as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Bryn, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my turn. We are on to item J for discussion. So this is next steps on equity focus for the city council. So the last time we took this up at a previous meeting, we were discussing steps for us to take as a council and how to move forward bringing equity into our council processes. I outlined in this memo the next steps that we talked about, and so wanted to discuss today really formalizing what our next steps are going to be. Can bring this back at the next meeting for actually voting. So there were several items we talked about: operationalizing our engagement procedure, adopting a policy assessment tool with an equity focus, creating a shared language for equity, and commitment to ongoing learning. Here, I don't really touch on those last two around the shared language and the ongoing learning. I feel that's something we should be addressing after town meeting day when new council is in place. So the three actual things that I've put on for discussion tonight are operationalizing that engagement procedure, selecting an assessment tool, which I have a few examples attached, and then also talking about how to engage our Inclusion and Belonging Commission. Like, I probably should have FYI'd that group on this memo and these considerations before tonight, but unfortunately I didn't think clearly about that until 2 days ago. So to split it up, I wanted to first talk about operationalizing engagement, but I'll just pause for like questions or clarity or anything.
I guess we'll talk about this when we get the tool possibly, but are you thinking we'll decide on that tonight, or is this to put it on?
Just discussion.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we can start there actually. We can go anywhere we want. So I have in the memo 5 different examples I received by reaching out to CCRCC, oh my gosh, her name is escaping me right now, at the Partnership Convention. Muriel Matthews, who's been coming to our meetings, shared some options, and then I missed this unfortunately in the memo. It's attached now to the agenda separately. There's also a tool that former councilor and Representative Hal Colston shared with us that they were using in the state legislature. So there's multiple examples here of how this could be approached. I think some of them are a little more complex than we're ready for, but it shows where we could go in the future. But I'll stop there and see what folks' thoughts are about the different options here. Aurora, do you want to start and share some of your thoughts?
Sure. Could I share my screen?
Mm-hmm. I think so, right?
Give me 2 seconds, Aurora. I got you covered. Hold on.
Because I went through them all and grabbed some of the questions that really stood out to me for the context. And kind of what I pulled out, I feel might still, in some cases I feel I'm not capturing everything, but I started just to kind of think about it in our context. And it was brought up specifically for policy review, but I think there might be some benefit for, and this was in, I think, Burlington's racial equity office, had, in addition, like budgetary review. I included that language here, kind of thinking about what is the goal of this. So just kind of laying out some ideas. I think, yes, for city council, it might be something that at some point would be beneficial for staff, but I don't want to put work on staff. That's not our place, but kind of having that as a potential idea. And then grabbed a couple of the key questions for kind of thinking about it. I feel like we want to change some of the language. And I specifically was thinking like we want to include language access because I didn't really see that in any of the others. But I wanted to pull out questions specifically thinking about the plan and outreach, clarifying the purpose, and I think one of them had considered adverse impacts, but I was just thinking consider impacts in general because some of them talk about is this something that will greatly benefit or will this have adverse effects? So actually kind of bringing those thoughts up and then including some like alternatives or improvements, putting in even a little audit process before it goes to a final vote. And then yeah, I put some notes in here as like how do we have consistent language? There's some in here that's like meaningfully, like what does meaningful mean? We want to define that for ourselves. Thinking about, I think some of them are focused on race, some of them are more general, and I think we probably want to lean towards more general, but then maybe still include a specific question about race, given kind of the historical, political, social construct of systemic racism in the United States. And then, as I mentioned, the Winooski context, thinking about language access and how that might be added. Kind of went through that really quick, but those are just going through the things that I was thinking about. It doesn't necessarily, like some of them went into like, these are step-by-step how you would go through a process. I didn't know if that was necessarily, like you said, Christine, if we're ready for that. So I just was like, here's some questions that really stood out to me, and I added or tweaked them a little bit, thinking about our linguistic context and how that may benefit.
Thanks for doing that, Aurora. This actually, as I'm looking at it, I think there's a lot of alignment between this and the state legislature version.
Yeah, I grabbed some of those, I changed like legislation to,
yeah.
I put in, I think, proposal, which was used by one of the others, if we wanted to think about it for something beyond just policy. Again, we might want to change some of the language, but thinking about, I think the intentional and unintentional impact is probably the biggest goal with this, to elevate and have questions thinking about it.
I'll let others weigh in too. Okay, like whether you want to respond to what Aurora's sharing, or if there's something that stood out to you when you were reviewing the different tools that were shared. Like, I think the goal of today is to figure out what to bring back to look at, so we can just have some discussion about what we think the goal of the tool is, or what things we like and want to make sure are captured.
Yeah, I mean, I just appreciate the time that you put into this, Councilor Hurd. I mean, I always like to defer to experts, and this is the realm that you work in. So I really appreciate you putting time into a document that you could show to us tonight. I don't really know that I have the expertise to add much more to it, to be truthful.
I'll second Councilor Renner and say that I also think it's a beneficial idea to review all the tools that are out there and to kind of pull elements that we think are strongest and that we think cater to Winooski's needs the most. So I really like your approach to do that. I would be interested in getting getting more input from Inclusion Belonging Commission and additional, especially as well as some of our other commissioners, give them the opportunity to weigh in before really bringing this back for discussion approval. So I know we do have time, and this is just kind of an introduction, but I would hope that that is built into the process.
And I guess, would this be a toolkit that we would be looking to serve both council and staff?
Just for council.
Okay.
Elaine, you can determine how it might inform the staff approaches, but whatever we're voting on is what we're committing to.
Right, and I will say that if we know what lens you're using, we will certainly be reviewing on our end. So, and I'm sure other work besides, but yeah, at a minimum.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I also want to echo the appreciation for kind of trying to take the various pieces and pull into something that's like a starting point for Winooski, which is great. And in reading through the various examples, I gravitated towards the state of Vermont Equity Impact Assessment tool and the Burlington's tool, which is an adaptation of the fifth example in the memo. Because it does give like specific questions that you can ask of a given policy. So I imagine this is being used when there's like our fee ordinance is up for a review, or when we're looking at our Chapter 9 and Chapter 5 housing, and whatever the other one is, the 3 housing chapter items, and we're like looking through those, and I think the level of detail that is required in going into assessing a given change, like it seemed helpful to frame some discussions. And one thing I did like about, I think, both of these, the State of Vermont, the Burlington tool, is that it doesn't require every question to be framed from a racial or ethnic diversity, equity perspective, but also so it can be around equity on anything, whether it's over age or access, physical ability. And then there are specific questions that dive into the racial equity, because that's something I think we need to consider explicitly aside from other equity considerations. Like I think that needs to be a both and. We can look at it from all lenses, but then I think we always need to consider racial equity in our community. So I think that was something that stood out to me, is that there was a tool that was explicitly doing both, instead of trying to put everything into one bucket and then assess it. I'm saying this right, but like it explicitly calls out racial equity as a second, like a specific area that we have to look at on its own, and then equity more broadly, which for our community is important because we have a large number of seniors, we have people with physical disabilities, we have folks who have economic in different economic classes. So I think that's something I'd like to see. We could adapt this to use for any policy and think about any of those components of equity, but we also dive into the racial piece. And it does, I mean, these are a lot. Like I don't think that we want a 26 question assessment tool is a lot for every item, but if we're doing it only for certain bigger picture things like ordinance changes, budget, policies and priorities, it's not that many places in that structured and considered reflection would be really helpful, I think, to produce and to read how others produce it.
Okay, yeah, so first, on the when, I do agree, like, we should start with ordinance or regulatory change or budget and strategy and priority, like, not trying to do this in every discussion, like, we can't do that yet. For your comment about the different types of equity and racial equity or racial justice, would that be addressed, you know, Aurora, you were saying like we need to flesh out
the identities or whatever that we're focused on. I feel like that's where that could be addressed.
Yeah, and I think I did highlight the language that the state used was BIPOC, LGBTQ+, disability, and migrant communities. And so I think having that general language and maybe fleshing that out a bit more, depending on kind of on our context and just making sure that's the right language to use. But I did keep one of the questions as is, and I think this might have been from Burlington, which is, does this item, program, policy, or practice align with the mission of ensuring racial equity? If not, in what ways does this perpetuate racial inequity? And I think, yeah, having at least one or two questions that specifically have us think about that. I think another one that might be helpful to pull out is, and this would, I think, come up in identifying stakeholders, is specifically thinking about accessibility around not just language, but ability just to access the forms to make sure they're readable for screen readers, and if we need ASL interpretation for an event, that's there. So I think that would be the two different areas might benefit from pulling out, but otherwise really thinking about how these different communities have both different needs, but also making sure we're considering all of them.
Could we use the official protected classes list, which I don't have in front of me and know quite how to find quickly, but I think like that would expand to include like seniors, maybe Morgan, what you were thinking of, Jen.
What about what we used in our inclusion, our statement of inclusion proclamation? What was that?
Yeah. Let's start with that list.
And I wonder if this would be helpful, if I can share, and I'm sorry, I was only able to really get this together today, otherwise I would have shared it ahead of time. But maybe if I share the list that I came up with, and then folks can make sure that if there are any other questions that stood out to you that I missed, or if there are any that I included that you think aren't beneficial, would that be a good place to start, Mayor?
I think we could start with aligning with that list from the proclamation. We already supported that. You know what? Okay, I'll share that out. And then if anyone thinks of an identity that's missing that they would want to see included, could directly share that with Aurora, just one person per email. And then, does it make sense, like getting this input tonight, and I'm surprised that you just worked on it yesterday, kudos, good job. Would it make sense for you to do a revision and then bring that to the IMB commission before it comes back to council?
Aurora?
Yeah, I think that's possible about that.
I wanted to clarify, were you offering to put back up the list of questions that you had drafted and crosswalking those with what other counselors had wanted to see, or were we talking about the list of protected classes or identities?
I did also, I wondered, the first part of that, Jim, if that might be helpful too, and I don't know if this would be useful in this meeting or if I send something out after the meeting. And again, individually, if you see a question that you wanted in there that I didn't include, and then I can kind of compile that and bring that into inclusion and belonging, or I don't know if we want to compile it, bring it back to council, review it in council. Okay.
I think the former is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that would work. For me, at least. When is the next IMB meeting? It's
23rd?
20.
We're aiming to have it on the 23rd. And I'll definitely talk with them about this really want to look at the equity audit, but I feel like this might fit in with that discussion really well. So I'll confirm with the chair and staff liaison.
Just so we would produce a recommendation from council at the next meeting, and then you would take that to the IMB meeting, because our next meeting is on the 21st. Is that?
We could do it that way. Aurora can share out this draft, and we can have that on the next agenda, and then provide some official feedback. That doesn't give the commission much time to look at it in advance.
Because we would miss the warning date for it.
Yeah. Would this be out of line, Elaine, to share the draft version with them and then add on the council approved guidance from the 21st?
No, I mean, yeah, whatever is available by whatever date, and then whatever is newly available by whatever date.
Okay.
You can do the track changes so that it's easier for them to review the changes.
Okay.
Also, I'll mention, I haven't looked at the statement in a bit, but the VLCT Equity Committee came up with a relatively expansive list of protected classes, so if you wanted to refer to that as well. I'll post it in the chat.
Okay, sorry, I'm noting the next steps. Okay, oh, thanks for that, Elaine, in the chat. And then I have this for our next steps. So Aurora's going to distribute this draft to the council. We will review it at our 221 meeting to provide official recommendation. Aurora's also going to distribute it to the Inclusion and Belonging Commission, so that they have time to digest it. After the 221 meeting, our official recommendations can be track changed into that, and that update shared with commissioners. Then we'll come back to the city council, which means it won't make it into our official orientation that we have during our organization meeting right after town meeting day. But shortly thereafter, we can incorporate it in, and maybe get some input from our new council member. Excellent. So oh, sorry. Is there any more question or comment on the equity assessment tool piece? Okay, let's talk about operationalizing our community engagement procedure. I tried to capture in there what I think we discussed. So there's a couple of questions. Do we identify one member of council to kind of take lead on checking in and keeping us on track? Do we commit to quarterly progress updates, similar to how staff brings us the different strategic vision area updates? I think those are the two key operational pieces. Should those updates also documenting the different community events and informal things we do. And then the last bullet is just kind of a note to remind us of, what Jim brought up about realistic expectations.
I think it'd be fantastic for council to identify a lead to keep council on top of outreach. I feel like we can say that from the position of that won't be me. But but in all seriousness, I think it's, I think for this engagement procedure to work, it doesn't have to be a driving person, but it can be a person who at least is making sure to check in periodically so it doesn't get lost. And this topic spurred me to think about where we were with Winooski Housing Authority building meetings, which we'd hoped to do on a quarterly to 3 times a year basis, and that's now. So I think even just being reminded to do that is not something that I would want to try and do and organize again. It just hadn't, at the time, had gotten away from me, and a lot of time has passed since our last one. So I think having that person who can just remind us where we are in the schedule would be really helpful. And it can be short updates. It can be like, this is what we've been able to do, and this is what we hope to do next. And it doesn't have to be a job. It could just be a helpful role to fill within council.
Yeah, I think, and even if it's maybe more so than a role, but like just the depository of events and outreach opportunities that exist, because I think like I'm happy to go to stuff and take time off of work where able, but what I don't necessarily always have the time to do is to search out events that exist for me to go to. That's personal, but yeah, like I definitely would love to be out more and to be doing more events and meeting with more diverse members of our community, but I just don't personally have the time to find out what those events are to get to them always. And maybe that is what this person, whoever this counselor is we designate, might be able to dedicate time to doing.
Yeah, I think how we discussed this before when we put this together was like, you're assigned a couple of different touch points, reach out to them from time to time. And this approach would be having one person kind of look at that spreadsheet monthly and be like, hey, have you talked to X community, or have we heard from them? Or there's a follow-up item, and then reminding us. That could be me too. It was anyone on the council could be doing this. We'll sort that out later. But I wanted to check if that felt like a valuable, like something that would improve. Because the time is getting away from me too, and I'm not following up like I wanted to in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely see the value in that. So I say that with knowing that I could not be that person, especially as liaison to commission.
Yeah, I think this would. I was gonna say, I think we would talk about it at the same time as we do liaison assignments.
I do think the like, where are we doing this engagement is something we were having that open discussion on last time. So there's the kind of counselor led, like either finding that space to go to meet with people where they're already convening. I'm thinking of like a PTO meeting, and making a point to get to one of those every 6 months. And the setup of that is hard, but the ongoing repetition of that becomes a little bit easier. And I wonder, so I think like if it's a fairly narrow focus on trying to build up that repertoire of people who you can convene with and places where you're convening where people are already convening, like that becomes a lot easier the next time around. Like again, I'll use my personal example of Winooski Housing Authority buildings. I now know who I would reach out to. I can understand like roughly how many people are going to show up, and we have the flyer already made for doing that session. So the next time around seems like I'll have to go through a few less steps than I did the last time. So the benefit, like taking a spreadsheet plus a person to just check in on, like, it's been 3 months, it's been 6 months, these people should, this group of these folks should be coming back up, and your name is next to that, Thomas. You know, I'm putting together a report for council, what should I say? It might help us stay on track. And so I think we can keep it somewhat circumspect and not have to be like a broader net of events that we can all try and get to, and that's a second, I think that's a useful direction too, but it's kind of two separate but parallel initiatives, I think.
Might need to do some more thinking about the quarterly update process too, and how to make that low lift. Should be this person as well, who's, you know, providing those for the meeting agendas. I think this is something I want to bring back when we do liaison assignments. So whatever input you all have to share today, I can bring it back at that point. Any other thoughts on next steps that we have here? And are you all okay with us revisiting the shared language and learning commitments at a future date?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay. Well, thank you all, and thank you, Aurora, for some quick work there. All right, let's move to item K. So in a similar vein, as we are moving towards town meeting day, and in my eyes, entering a new year of council work, is how I feel about it. As we approach that timing and reflecting on, I feel like the budget discussions were really challenging this year, not just because of the position we were in, but because we didn't have, I think last year when we did strategic prioritization process, which we have done annually for some years, I think that because of where we were at with city manager hiring and staff capacity, that there wasn't a real opportunity or space for members of council to have much input on that. You know, we kind of had an existing list of must-dos and not much wiggle room on there. So I wanted to outline, like, this is typically how we go about the process to make sure that we are taking some time and being strategic. We can't do everything. We don't have the money or staff capacity to address every issue. We never will. And so we followed this process in the past to really align on what are the highest priorities so that we stay focused on that throughout the year. I wanted to outline what we have done in the past to hear, like, what might we change or how might we make this better. So this starts with the orientation that happens for new council after town meeting day. You might recall that we used a lot of time at the strategy and priority session last year, kind of deep diving into departments and operations. Staff is proposing to do that in advance this year, like starting after orientation, so we don't use, we have more time for the actual prioritization discussion. We also should be adding an engagement plan and equity assessment tool based on the last item. We then lean on our commissions to gauge progress towards master plan goals. And they share recommendations. Those aren't like binding recommendations, but they should inform our thinking about what have we been doing well and where are we missing, what might we focus on. I think there's an opportunity there to do another convening of commission chairs. Not exactly sure what that looks like, especially now that we have the Inclusion and Belonging Commission, which isn't siloed to a single strategic area of the plan. I think this year I would own being accountable to inviting input in advance from council. Are there new priorities on your mind, areas that we have been looking at, so that we can have that parking lot of items available to us in the priorities discussion, if there's things we want to move in and out. So I think the outcome of this process is that like we all feel bought into what those priorities are and where we're aligned, so that when something new pops up, we either stay focused on what we said were priorities, or if this thing really is urgent and we need to deal with it, then we're also aligned on like what are we pausing on for now. So questions about process, ideas for improvement, concerns?
I don't have any concerns. I think it's a great idea to start some of this conversation with the council in March. Yeah, it does, at least the last two that I've been on council, it does feel like those retreats are, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I would only worry or have, I guess my only concern there would be how these changes in timing would play into staff capacity, if it would actually be beneficial or if it would put more strain. So I guess that's one question that I want to put out there. I think on the council side of things, it would feel beneficial to hear thoughts before we kind of get to day of the retreat, so that I can have some frame of reference for suggestions that the various counselors will present, as well as the commissions. I think they often are reactive, and it might be nice to offer some proactive opportunities for input as well. So I do see some benefit to the change, and also want to think about staff ability and how that would play into it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So we did discuss it at the leadership team level. I'm trying to think through if I gave them adequate time to push back. But the debrief we had right after last year was like, well, we kind of overloaded council, and it wasn't as beneficial as the intent was. So I think generally spacing it out, we can be flexible about which department goes when to help with that workload. I think in general, it's actually probably a better approach.
Great.
But thank you.
I think there's an opportunity then too, in those sort of department operations overviews, to preview what you're thinking are going to be the upcoming priorities. Not to say that that's what they are or we're committed, but to start giving, to Bryn's point, giving more time to digest that. And so also, Bryn, I think ensuring that the commission recommendations come to council more than one meeting before, and whatever, and the process for inviting council input for new ideas also gives time for us to see all of those in advance and think about them. Or maybe that's another agenda item for discussion too. I'll think about that.
And I do want to mention that, given that we're in our first meeting in February, this might even take another year before we can kind of tease out the timeline a little bit more, so it can be, more lined up a little bit better. Because even starting now, it still feels a little constrained to be ready for May, considering for example, the Infrastructure Commission, we may not meet this month, or other commissions may not meet. Most of them won't be meeting in March, so the next kind of opportunity for conversation would be April, which then compresses the time for council, things to come back to council before they are ready for the retreat. So just kind of thinking about how things are compressed, and whether or not we just live with it, or whether or not there's some more ideal timing that we can kind of build in.
I appreciate the continuous improvement focus.
I don't have an answer. It's mainly the thing.
Yeah.
Well, and something that I think we should considers that the budget, if it's approved by voters, is setting a bit of policy direction already for 20, and so like I'm
That's
just
very
looking
true.
back at our policies and priorities, policy priorities and strategies from last year, and like many of these things are things that have been budgeted. Some of that stuff that's been budgeted in, and we really shouldn't just take a left turn and say, oh, this is a light green, we're gonna drop it off the list if something gets hard. Like in some ways the budget is already kind of a commitment to do some of those things. So maybe one way to kind of separate out these items is to identify like these are things the budget is already kind of forcing us to focus on, and so shifting these would really be like a more substantial change than adding something new or dropping one new idea in favor of another new idea. So I wonder if you could kind of shorten that list or start that conversation earlier, but like here's what we see as coming as staff priorities already based on the budget. And that would reduce this list maybe somewhat and make it a little bit easier to like think about how much more can you add and how does that get done.
That's a really good point, Jim. And on top of that, other things that we are like legally committed to continue.
Yeah.
And making that clear to us to know like this thing really can't be dropped. Or, you know, in theory, we could change something, but if we have a voter approved budget, that is certainly guidance we should be eating.
Yeah.
We do have someone still in the audience.
Oh, great. Is there any public comment or questions?
No, but I wanted to give the opportunity.
Thank you for that, Bryn. We haven't had anyone on Zoom for a while, and so it fell off of my radar. Sorry about that. So this is only on for discussion. If you have other thoughts and ideas you want to share with me, please reach out. I also just thought it was important to kind of share this overview so that we all know, like, what does this look like? How have we gotten to where we are today? In addition to, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, and I do see the benefit in, I think sometimes, or at least the two commissions I'm on, there's sometimes like, well, what's council want us to do? So this feels like it can help better that communication too, of like, what do they see that we need to work on, and also how can we better help with giving them plans to approach their future meetings.
That's a really good point, Aurora. In theory, coming out of a strategy and priority session, we should be able to like set those goals for each commission. I don't think we got there. Actually, in most years, I don't think we've really gotten there. I think we're getting better at it, but we still haven't gotten there of being very clear of helping commissions know what is your focus, this is what you should be working on, or where they have room. So that's a comment I want to think about alongside, like, if we convene chairs again, what is it, like, how do we make this more effective?
Yeah, because I think maybe, especially with, say, publicly connected people, again, inclusion and belonging is supposed to be a little bit more outside of the traditional structures. And I think they're kind of getting in that group, but even just an update on, like, here are some things council is thinking about. We might might want your opinion on them, so just make sure they're on your radar. I would say that'd be beneficial.
Yeah, see, we had commission work required as a column in the last round, and I don't think that was easy to translate into a work plan because it could mean like this will come to you for some feedback, or this you're going to be driving the policy discussion, the policy formulation on this topic. So that could be a way to. It would be nice if the commission work plans were largely written out of that policies and priorities session, or at least the first 6 items or whatever for each commission, and they can certainly add, but I think that would be helpful to show or signify, like, is this something we want to get commission leadership on?
Yeah. See, we made a step towards improvement, but it wasn't quite there. There's can be a little bit better.
I think one thing that is, again, just kind of thinking in the moment, our items, as we have recurring commission updates and reviews of where we are with each of the work plan items, and wondering about the things that we're behind on for each of those areas, and whether or not those should be elevated to have more focus since they're behind. Is there catch up that needs to happen? It may be case dependent, or is it something that can be reevaluated as a need, I guess.
And following up on what that looks like, right? Because we've been hearing a desire from the planning commission to do more focus on historic preservation. We deprioritize that. So explaining to them why, when we might bring it back, what a discussion would look like to pivot on that. And I know there's other topics like that.
Certainly something that the equity assessment tool will be very beneficial for.
Anything else on this item? Okay, as I said before, I welcome ongoing thoughts. Not the last time we'll talk about our process. That is the end of this evening's agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jen, second by Brennan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you all. Enjoy your evening.
It's so early.
Here.